Between the years of 1993 and 2023, I wore no hats. Why would I wear a hat? I had hair. It just felt like an element that I couldn't handle, frankly. But then, you get into your 30s and you're like, maybe I should take care. Maybe I should wear that daily sunscreen. I know the 20-year-olds now already know this. They had the internet. Messed them up in a lot of ways, but it did give them early awareness of skincare. But I'm there now, and I've got my sunscreen, and I'm wearing hats. I've also been watching Real Housewives of Rhode Island, and Liz rocks some great bucket hats in that show. So I really felt inspired to get my bucket hat game together. I had done a bucket hat pattern a few years ago, but I wasn't ready for it. I wasn't wearing hats. So I revisited it, and I figured out a way for you to do it too without a pattern at all. Enjoy. I've got my paper, some rocks to hold it down, a ruler, marker, string, scissors, and a little pin. I'm going to follow the same process for both the brim and the side of the hat. And then I need to mark 5.5 inches from my marker, which is right here, on the string. And that's the point at which I'm gonna twist it around my pin. And bring it to our paper and make a circle. So this is 5.5 inches between my marker and my pin. So if you don't want to make this contraption, you could just use a ruler. Next, we are going to draw a line up at 90 degrees and mark 3.5 inches here and here. I would normally do this with pencil. I'm just using marker for the sake of the camera. You're welcome. So we'll connect all those dots. Measure from this line 12 inches along this bottom curve. And 19 inches along this bigger curve. And when we connect those two lines, it should more or less make a right angle with both of the curves. So this should be right angle, this should be a right angle, this should, and this should. This is where we're going to cut on the fold, and the rest of this is going to have a 1/2 inch seam allowance. So you're going to make a 5.5 inch radius circle. You'll measure up 3.5 inches. You'll measure out 12 inches at the bottom and 19 inches at the top. Then you'll cut this on the fold, and that will give you the pattern piece for your brim. My hat's lined, so I cut this in my mean fabric and my lining fabric. So for the side, we're doing the same thing, except the curve is made with a 30-inch circle. And that more curvy part is going to measure 11.5 inches. And the second layer is going to measure 13 inches. And again, when I match these, it should be more or less right angles. So this was made with a 30-inch radius circle. I measured up 4.5 inches. I measured out this way 11.5 inches, and I measured out this way 13 inches. These are all about right angles. This will be where I'll cut in the fold. And again, I'm going to cut this in both my lining and my main fabric. So this is the edge of the brim. This is the part of the brim that meets the side of the hat. This is the part of the side of the hat that meets the brim. And this is the part of the side of the hat that meets the top. Now the top is just a circle with a radius of 3 3/4 inches. You could do the string on a pin method, but I think I'm actually going to do it another way. One, to demonstrate another way to make a circle, which you could use for the other pieces as well. And two, with a smaller circle, I think it's a little bit harder to use the pin on a string method. So you'll draw a dot on your paper, and then at 3 3/4 inches, you'll draw another dot, and then you're going to repeat that a whole bunch of times. I'm going to make a half circle and then fold the paper in half and cut it, but you could just continue all the way around. If you wanted your brim to be less like big than mine, I feel like a hipper bucket hat is a little bit more like closing in on the face a little bit. Then you want your bottom curve to be a little less curvy. And to do that, you would make a bigger circle. So you'd make this curves using, say, a 8-inch radius circle. And then you'd still measure that to be 12 inches. But instead of measuring it to be 19 inches now down, you just need these to be mostly right angles. So it would probably be a little bit less than 19 inches. I sewed my top piece to my side pieces in both my lining and my main, and then did my best to press those seams nice and smooth, which is really much easier said than done. Now here's where the real innovation comes in. The challenge I've had with sun hats is that you wear them when it's sunny and presumably hot. If it's hot, I want my hair up, not squished into my head and neck. Cue the pony hole. Maybe that's not what that's called. But you know them from your baseball caps. But why are they not more frequently on a sun hat? This is the joy of sewing your own stuff. I eyeballed the hole shape on one side of the seam and then used that to trace a symmetrical shape on the other side of the seam. I used the piece that I cut out as a pattern to mark the hole on my lining. I pinned the lining to the main along that part I just cut, right sides facing, and sewed it together. I flipped it so that wrong sides were facing, pressed it, and top stitched it. Okay, that's all I'm going to cover in terms of construction today, but let me know in the comments if you'd like to know more about how to assemble this thing. Yeah, it's not really a bucket hat. I don't know if I can call it that.